Yeah, so welcome to our new people who are joining, Shlomo and Jeremy. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed learning the daf that you got. It's kind of like the luck of the draw. So what we're doing now is we'll just say a very brief idea, something that came up in what we learned, according to the order of the sugiyot. So I was the first sugya, and it's really fascinating material on how sek mitzvah, patur mina mitzvah, one who is doing a mitzvah is thereby patur from other mitzvot, which brings about a very interesting machloket among Rishonim as to how far that patur goes. And kind of the centerpiece of the machloket is an episode in the Gemara, which I will just read because it's really the center of this issue. It's so it is told that Rav Chizda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna ki havu aile b'shabta de rigla lebei reish galuta havu gane arikta de surah. So Rav Chizda and Rabba bar Rav Huna, when they went to the shiur of the Reish Galuta on the Shabbat of the Regel, they during Sukkot, they would sleep on the bank of the Surah River, and not in a sukkah. And what did they say? They said, Amrei anan shluchei mitzvah anan. We are shluchei mitzvah. In other words, we are, because we came to the shiur of the Reish Galuta, therefore we are now patur from all of the mitzvot. Now, that goes against the argument of the Tosfot, who say that if you are doing a mitzvah that you can do two at the same time, you're not patur. It would seem that Rav Chizda and Rav Huna, they would have been able to sleep in the sukkah. The shiur is during the day. What's the problem? Therefore, the Ravad argues no, that the patur goes further, and you can even use it in a case like this. And they were actually patur from other mitzvot. They're patur from the sukkah because they had come to the shiur of the rabbi. So I think now we can all use this very well in coming to shul and listening to the shiur of Rabbi Koenigsberg. We can say, we don't have to daven, we're patur, we just came for the shiur. Anyway, so that's the piece that I had.
And it's normally the other way around. Normally they come for davening and they leave before the shiur. So
that's true. So anyway,
no one here. No, I'm not talking about anybody on here, of course.
Yeah, of course. So Howie told me he might not be able to join, and indeed he's not here. So next up is Ellie.
Oh, all right. Yeah, my stuff was a very longish, complex stuff at the beginning of Lulav Hagazul, which is a really yeshivishtik sugya there. Without going to any enormous amount of detail, because every topic there is debated in and out, and it's really very fundamental. The first major topic there is mitzvah bar bavera. If you have a lulav hagazol, a stolen lulav, if you use it, are you yotzer or not? On the first day of Sukkot, we need shalachah. It needs to be your own anyway, and that's quite apart from the union of mitzvah bar bavera. You wouldn't be able to use a stolen lulav for the reason it didn't belong to you. On the second day, there's actually a machlokas on this. There's no need for lecha on the second day. You could actually use a borrowed lulav, but then there's an inyan. If it's stolen, are you going to be yotzer because of a mitzvah bar bavera? There's a view that since the second day is midrabanan, really outside Yerushalayim, that maybe mitzvah bar bavera won't apply. There's another view that it does apply. So that's the first main inyan. of Mitzvah Barbara, which is, of course, a sugya which appears in many places in Shas. The second main Indian, I mean, really they're all related, is a very famous Gemara of the Hanahu Havankari. These merchants, Jewish merchants, they want to sell large quantities of myrtle leaves or whatever it is, and they approach the landowners, and the landowners are non-Jewish landowners, and Rav Huna gave these Jewish merchants advice that they should not themselves, even if they're invited to, cut off the myrtles or the hadassim from the land, even under the instruction of the Goyish landowners, just in case the land itself doesn't belong to them. That land may actually have been stolen, so to speak, of a Jew, maybe another non-Jew, and doesn't belong to the landowner wishing to sell to the Jewish merchants. In that situation, actually, there's a klal that karka einon nigzelis. The land itself, land can never be formally stolen. I mean, it doesn't belong to you, but it's not unmovable that can really be subject to the formal rules of theft. However, as soon as you cut off the hadassim from the land, it becomes something which is stealable. And if the Jewish merchant cuts off the stuff from the ground, there's a risk that he may actually be doing gezela unwittingly, because the land may have belonged to somebody else. The moment he cuts it off, the Jewish merchant is cutting off hadassim that doesn't belong to him. He is the guzzler now, not ironically the non-Jewish person who owned the land, who had stolen the land. And then when he sells it on to a Jew, then it could be that the Jew wouldn't be yotze. And in any case, the merchant himself would be over on the din of gezela. So Rav Huna said to them, look, we don't know whether the land is stolen or not. We're not saying every case is, but just in case it is, make sure that they're the ones who cut it off. So essentially it becomes gezela b'yodehem. They're the ones who've stolen it. And then when they give it to you, because they're the thieves, not you, and there's gezela and there's shinui rishus when they pass it to you, anyone buying off you could use it then for the mitzvah of Arba Minim. So there's a lot of Gemara really of that nature over here, not something I would have chosen to take really on a 1 week, week on week, but there you are. It's very fundamental in terms of Shinui Rishus, Yush, and Mitzvah Ba'Aver on those sugyot.
Thank you. Thank you for learning that difficult section. And I go to according to the order pretty much. So
yeah,
I'll try to see if this week it'll be a little bit better for you, because we're getting, so apologies. So
sure.
Now Shlomo, you had the next sugya.
Okay, my piece was a little bit more prosaic than the previous ones. It's about basically starts discussing blemishes which would make a lulav unfit. Things like it being thorny or curved or hard or with leaves just on one side. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I found interesting was a piece about units of measurement, about the length of a tefach, relating to the minimum length of hadassim, aravot, and also the lulav. So there's a braita which is quoted, Shiur hadas va'arava shlosha, lulav arba'a, Rabbi Tarfon omer ba'ama bat chamisha tfachim, which is basically saying that the minimum measure of a hadas and arava is 3 tfachim, and lulav 4. And Rabbi Tarfon says, we're basing this on a ama of 5 tvachim, which seems quite straightforward, except that there are 2 opinions. 2 rabbis, Rav Dimi and Rav Ravin, have different views as to how to understand what Rabbi Tarfon meant by tefach. So in the case of Rav Dimi, it says, Ki ata Rav Dimi amar ama bat 6 tvachim ase ota bat 5. צא מהן 3 להדס והשאר ללולב, כמה הבו להו, תלתה ותלתה חומשי, which is 3 3/5. So when Rav Dimi came to Eretz Israel, he came from Eretz Israel to Bavel, he gave his opinion as to what Rabbi Tarfon meant by how to measure the minimum size of hadassim and aravot. He said that the tefach for measuring hadassim is 1/5 of a 6 tfachim amah. We take an amah of 6 tfachim, divide it by 5, and that's the tefach that you should use for measuring a hadas, arava, and lulav. So that the minimum length of hadassim and aravot would be 3 3/5 standard tfachim. That is 1 1/5 times 3. Comes along Rav Ravin. He came from Eretz Israel to Bavel and said the opposite, or something different. Amah bat chamisha tfachim aseh ota shisha. Tse mehen shlosha lahadas v'asha lululav kama habulahu trei ufalga, 2.5. So when he came from to Bavel, he said that Rabbi Tarfon meant that the tefach for measuring hadassim is a 5 tefachim amah divided by 6. That is, a tefach is 5/6 of the standard tefach. So that the minimum length of hadassim and aravot would be 2.5 standard tefachim. That's 3 times 5/6. The Gemara continues and involves Shmuel, and in the end comes down on the side of the opinion of Ravin that the minimum size of a hadas and arava is 2.5 standard tfachim. I think actually the halacha is 3 tfachim, but in times of b'shat adchak, 2.5 tfachim. That's what I.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean the whole issue of shiurim and the Gemara is fascinating because it's all done kind of on the eye by and they don't have absolute measurements like we do. And today you open up Sifrei Halacha and they tell you it has to be this exact amount. And obviously there are machlokot about shiurim, but it all goes back to the ambiguity of no absolute shiurim.
Right.
Thank you. So Jeremy, you were next.
Yes. Right. I was looking at the catastrophic things that can go wrong with your hadas, and having dealt with the lulav, the esrog, there are all sorts of terrible things that can go wrong. We now focus on deficiencies in the hadas. It lists the usual ones: the stolen one, the one from an ashera, the one which is withered, and so on. And then the Gemara really uses the opportunity, it seems to me, to look at the sort of things that can go wrong with the mitzvah which is in front of you. And it discusses basically 3 concepts. One is dichui, one is nira v'nidcha, and one is tasa v'lo ha'osoi. And all of these are, in one way or another, brought to bear within the context of your hadas. And dichui is when you've got a mitzvah and the mitzvah somehow is taken away from you. The Gemara here discusses or makes reference to the case in Chulin of your kisui hadam. You've shechted your animal. There's a nice pool of blood there, and the wind comes and covers it up. Has the wind actually taken away your mitzvah? If another wind coming in the opposite direction suddenly reveals the blood again, does the mitzvah reappear, or does it not? And in this context, Ola Bachinana talks about the unfortunate circumstances in which the tip breaks off your hadas, but it grows a berry, which makes it, according to his opinion, okay for use in your Ava Minim. And Rabbi Yirmiyah asks one of his typically tricky questions: what happens if the tip of your hadas breaks off before the chag, but then a berry grows back, as it were, to retrospectively kasher it afterwards? And this is a typical dichui situation. Has the mitzvah been pushed away, or does it revive itself? The Gemara then discusses nira v'nidcha, which I always thought of in terms of korbanos, when you've got your deer ready, well, sorry, your deer, you've got your ox or your sheep ready for a korban, and it vanishes for a couple of days and then comes back again. It was okay when you had it in mind to bring it for the korban. It disappears, you take your mind off and get another one, and it reappears again. And the question of Nerev and Nidcha, here we have a slightly different case. You've got berries on your hadass, which are still red at the time when the chag comes in, and they become black after the chag comes in. Red berries within the context of this Gemara are okay. Black berries are not. Does it take away the mitzvah? And the third category of problem that we have is that of tasem in sorry. You've got an item which you are hoping to use for the purposes of a mitzvah, but it hasn't been prepared by you. This is in the context of whether we can learn the halachas of lulav and the things that go with lulav from the laws of the sukkah itself. And really, it's quite interesting the way these concepts sort of go one after the other. Because with dichui, you've got a mitzvah, and the mitzvah itself disappears. You had the mitzvah of hadass, now you don't have the mitzvah of hadass, if it turns out that you can't use your hadass, because the mitzvah itself is gone. Nerev and Nidcha isn't so much the mitzvah that disappears as the object with which you want to perform the mitzvah, the hefzer mitzvah. And that might be deficient, unusable. So first you've got dichui, the mitzvah disappears. Then you've got Nerev and Nidcha, which is the hefzer mitzvah disappears. And then you've got tasem in ha'asuri, where the mitzvah is there, and there is a hefzer, but it is a hefzer mitzvah. It depends upon what you've done to it. And all of these concepts are reviewed, these very abstract concepts with practical applications. They're all reviewed within the context of the poor little hadass. Incidentally, I was very taken by the rapid growth of things on the hadass, the stem of the hadass, after it's already been cut and it's ready for a mitzvah. Having been picking miniature lemons in Lodz this week, I've discovered that nature can run its course extraordinarily quickly, and a plant which, a fruit which was green in the morning can turn out to be bright yellow 3 hours later.
Cut him off, Aaron.
Yeah, that's it.
I'll be cut off. That's it.
Okay, so hold on. I didn't cut him off, but we do have our time. We do have our time constraints.
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't. I wasn't timing myself.
No, it's fine. You're good. We heard your Brisker method coming loud and clear, and that's perfectly legitimate. And so thanks. Yeah, we want to keep it like so that we're done at 6, meaning like around 3 minutes. I think I went over a little bit. I think I did like 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So I was also too long. Michael, you have to unmute yourself, Michael.
Let's get to it. Okay, so continuing Hadassim and Aravot. It says in the Torah that that the Aravot are Arvei Nachal. So we have different things here. According to the Rashi at the bottom of Lamed Gimel, Amud Beis at the bottom, Rashi is of the opinion that Arvei Nachal versus Arvei Mikol Makom, that Aravot could be growing. A lot of we have Aravos trees. They're not next to the river or the stream. So Rashi is of the opinion, minority opinion, that it really has to be Arvei Nachal. He wants it to come from the side of the water, where the water actually is. However, most of the Rishonim, especially the Rush, explains that the intent of the Gemara is that the species naturally and primarily grows by the water, even if it's growing somewhere else. And that is the way we hold. The next little ha'ara is that the opinion of the that has come down as far as our tradition, 2 Aravot and 3 Hadassim. So the Rishonim talk about what's considered Baal Tosif. If you add extra Hadassim, if you add extra Aravot. So Tosfos says there's no Baal Tosif involved unless you add an extra mean. In other words, instead of the Arba minim, it becomes the Chamisha minim, right? So there's no Baal Tosif involved. However, the Rambam says that the only thing you could really add are the Hadassim. You shouldn't add to the aravot one lulav, one esrog, two aravot, because the hadassim are there more as a hidur mitzvah, to beautify the mitzvah. Or the other ones there have a more integral part of the mitzvah. The hadassim are more for beautify the mitzvah. So why are the hadassim different? We'll see that in a minute. The Rambam's son, the Rav Avraham ben HaRambam, says that the Rambam was really just saying that adding the hadassim does not make them possible. However, the Rashbam learns that the Rashba in his tshuva says that the hadassim are different because it's done for the beautification purposes, and there's no doubt about Tosif when done for the beautification. While the other three we don't do. Now, we have probably seen at different times in our lives, in shuls, by the kosel, people coming with these huge bunches of hadassim. So that struck my fancy to find out where does this minhag come from. Obviously, the Rambam is the original source, probably, for adding a lot. So there's this thing, the Sefer HaMinhagim, that talks about having 4, 13, or 26. Don't use 9, 68, or 69 of them. I don't know the reason for that. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and people said that the Lubavitcher Rebbe minhag was that from 1951, when he became Rebbe, until about 1981, he used, I wrote this down, he used 13. And then he used 26. And then after 1981, he used 36 hadassim. So you'll see that there's a lot of makoras for using to be marbe b'hadassim. So when we see it, we know where it comes from. It's the part of the hidur mitzvah that the Rambam brought into play. That's it.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Hillel.
So my daf, which was basically Lamed Vav, talks about the esrog. And the entire time I was learning through it, I had in mind the vision of the people in the Arba Minim Shuk examining the esrog for hidur, and with the loop, Michael, with the diamond loop.
The diamonds.
Yeah. So and as you go through the daf, you see that at least in terms of kashrus, the rabbis were much more lax in terms of what they were accepting. So b'derech klal, they talked about the size of the esrog. They talked about whether or not the esrog was kosher, if there was a puncture in it, if parts of it were missing, if it was spotted or blotted, the shape. They created esrogim inside of certain presses to create a different shape. So back and forth in terms of what was permitted, what wasn't. Again, much more lenient than one might have expected based on current practices. The two things that were most interesting to me, one was the very first thing which was brought down, which is the Gemara that actually the first line that I had to learn said Natla Pit Maso. The pitum is gone. So we all know what the pitum is, except that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says it's not that little wooden piece on the top the Ashkenazim care about and the Sephardim don't care about, but rather it's the slope leading up to it. That's what's most important in terms of, that's what's referred to as a pitum, and that's where the problem could be. And the last piece, which was interesting to me, I thought it was amusing, the Gemara says, esrog that was gnawed away at by achbarim, by mice. So Rav says it's not a hidur and it's puzzle. And they ask a question on this. Wait a minute, Rab Chanina used to take a bite out of his esrog, and then he would use it. So I had visions of having esrog soup. As it turns out to be the second day, the Gemara tries to make a distinction. First day you couldn't do it, but by the second day already, since only Rabbanan, you're welcome to take a bite out of your esrog and then use it. It's not a problem. And even according to Rav, who said that it's not hidur, he said that's only when the mice are eating it, because that's really, it's mos. But when Eli or somebody else is taking a bite out of his esrog, it's not a problem. So feel free next year. That was my daf.
Okay, thanks. Bobby.
I forgot my visual material here. Actually, actually, visual material with nice red stems and everything is real aravot, right?
Nice. Yeah, I mean in Ashkenaz, like around Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, there's a lot of discussion because they had a very big difficulty getting Arba Minim, and they would save them from year to year, basically.
How's that gonna work? Yeah.
Bobby,
I
go ahead.
have them here.
No, that's
Ah.
Oh, how we have Hadassim here.
Oh, that's a big heater. It's a big heater. Okay.
Very briefly, one of the things that's discussed in our daf is lakicha al yedei davar acher. How can you take a lulav of the arba minim? And the issue seems to be the definition and from the pasuk in the Emor, lekachtem lachem bayom rishon, lekachtem lakicha tam. So I'll just tell you two things. One, the first thing that came to mind was the video I got around Sukkot time this year of the robot picking up the lulav and doing the four nanuim with it.
He was excellent.
So I'll let, but he didn't have an esrog, so I'm not sure anybody was yotze with it. But the other thing is that Tosfos mentions, which I found interesting, because there's a machlokas in the Gemara. When you say al yedei davar acher, exactly what does that mean? But Tosfos brings the issue of a handkerchief. If you have a glove, I think Rava said you're not yotze. Rava says lakicha al yedei davar acher is not a problem. But Tosfos defines the issue of taking a lulav with a handkerchief as wrapping the lulav with a handkerchief and then twisting the ends of it and then having the other part in your hand. So it becomes the handkerchief becomes an extension of your hand, and that's considered lakicha tama and your yotze. That's it for my piece tonight.
Okay, thanks. Rabbi Koenigsberg, you.
Okay, I have 2.5 minutes. So, I'll just share a brief idea. So in Daf Lamed Zayin with Bet, very interesting. The Gemara says, Amarabba, you have lulav biyamin ve'etrog bismol. Right, when you have the lulav in your right hand and the etrog in your left hand. Of course, you're left-handed, but and the Gemara says, why is that? It says the lulav, of course, is the eged together with the hadas and yaravot. So it says that is 3 mitzvot, and the etrog is only 1 mitzvah. Okay, interesting language. The Gemara says mitzvah, but the point is that what's the havamina here? You would think generally we give more significance to that which is in the right. You would think that the etrog should take the place in the right hand, and the lulav should be in the left hand. And it's the opposite way around. The Gemara then asks, why is it? Why do we say the bracha on the lulav of all the things? Because the lulav is the tallest, it's the most recognizable. But we think that the etrog is more. Look at how much people spend on their etrog. Look at how long they spend looking for the hidurim or the etrog versus the lulav. But yet the Gemara says because we have 3, so the lulav goes in the right and the etrog goes in the left. This is just a numbers game. So the Chatam Sofer points out. He says the whole idea, we take the arba minim, we bring them together. The famous midrash, now myself you have to say that it's famous, I'm sure everybody here knows it, that where you have the 4 different species represent 4 different types of Jews. And the one who has taste and no smell, and smell, no taste, etc. Torah, masim tovim, etc. But they all have to come together. The etrog has both taste, has both smell. The etrog's got everything. But when it's by itself, it's nothing. It has to be together with the others. So even the most, whatever you are and whoever you are, if you're by yourself, you're alone, you're not going to be as significant as when the Jewish people can come together. And ultimately, of course, we bring all 4 species, we bring them together, and that's the message of Achdut, the message of coming together, the message of, which is obviously very pertinent to our days, very pertinent to the day that we're entering now, as Rabbi Tevet as well. So,
Okay.
Very nice. Yeshua koach. I'll just finish with one idea, even though we're going to go over 1 minute. A little personal story that when I was thinking about Osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah, on October 7th, my son was called to the north, and they were in the middle of Chag, obviously, and he came home, got his stuff, and drove up, and they were planning on going home, Motzei Chag. The next day, he called me and he said, I know I'm asking a lot, but I really need my tefillin. And so I drove, and that was the main thing that he wanted that he did not have. I just felt I just felt a kind of something very strong at that moment. I mean, anyway, it was such an emotional time, but so he didn't feel he was patur min mitzvah, even though he was definitely was and is osek b'mitzvah. So thank you very much, and we will. I'll send out as soon as I can the next dapim for next week.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.